Joshua on AlUla FM podcast.
The sound of Arabia.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Mr. David Popa, who was an artist born and raised in New York City, currently based in Finland. His interest in art spawned from a tight mentorship with his father, Albert Popa, who was one of the first graffiti writers in New York City, and later taught him traditional painting at a young age. However, what ultimately spurred Popa to pursue the arts full-time were the adventures to be had outside of his studio. His interest in street art and contemporary muralism was the catalyst for the work he presently creates. His current body of work uses all natural pigments, mixed only with the source water, to create site-specific ephemeral earthworks captured through the eye of a drone. David, welcome to Artifact.
So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
David, what makes you dedicate your life to art?
To be honest, I didn't even want to be an artist. My dad taught me how to paint and draw at a very young age, and it was what I was good at. Certainly used it to attract attention. So sometimes I used it for bad reasons, and you're a kid at school and you could draw something realistic and you get attention for it. But fundamentally, I wanted adventure in my life. I loved to go out in nature, despite the fact that I grew up in New York City, or maybe because of the fact that I grew up in New York City, a patch of grass and running around and exploring films, movies, adventures. Those are all the things that made me really come alive, and had a really hard time sitting down in a studio all day painting and drawing, even though it was what I was good at. And it's what allowed me to get through life. I was able to go to a specialized arts high school, college, and majored in arts throughout that time. But eventually it came to a head and I was like, well, how could it be possible to merge movement and life and adventure and art together? And things came full circle. And as you mentioned, my dad was one of the early graffiti writers. And so I ended up thinking, well, what if I grabbed, at the time, I just went to the Home Depot in Boston.
Which is a hardware store.
Which is a hardware store, that's
right. For those of you who don't know.
And just grabbed 3 cans. They were $1 each, like a black, white, and a yellow or something. And I went to a local free wall. And so near my college, there was a wall where you can do murals, and mostly graffiti writers went there to do legal works. They were mostly doing legal, and they could spend a long time doing a legal piece. And so I rolled up there painting like Van Gogh in my own rendition. And a lot of the guys looked at me like, what on earth are you doing here?
Right, like you're vandalizing vandalism.
That's exactly right. And it changed my life that day. I mean, being outside and moving and doing something on a large scale, and of combining this sort of kinetic aspect that made me feel like I could come alive. And so basically that led me down a path, and eventually traveled to Finland one day and fell in love with a girl and moved to Finland. And in Finland, there it's known for the archipelago, these beautiful islands scattered around. And we were boating one day, and I was looking at these rocks, and I was like, is there any way that I could basically paint on mountains or rocks? And follow that trip to a trip in Norway, to the Lofoten Islands in northwest of Norway. And I just had this feeling that would there be any way to this missing link would be nature, right? In the urban context, didn't have nature. And I was a professional artist there in Finland doing large scale mural street art pieces. And it was a question of like, is there any way I could basically paint in nature, paint on rocks? And at that time, what is paint? A lot of people don't even know what is in paint. The idea is...
For instance, I don't know.
Right.
You're saying a lot of people, I would assume most people in the world don't really relate to paint.
And being an artist since I was quote unquote an artist, maybe using paint since I was 5 years old, I didn't even know what paint was. And so then I was like, well, I certainly can use paint. Isn't all paint toxic, right? And then I started doing some research, and I was like, well, who painted on rocks? Like the cave painters, right? And like, well, what did they use? They weren't making toxic materials. And then a little bit of research showed that, well, very easily you could make charcoal, mix it with water. A lot of them spit on it, mix some saliva. And so fundamentally you could even mix charcoal and with water, chalk with water, and earth pigments. There's a lot of earth. Basically, if you go and pick up a rock, it's called a scratch test. You scratch another harder rock. And if you see a color arise, then you could grind that down and essentially make a pigment. And so this sort of changed everything for me. I got really nerdy and obsessed with...
So all of a sudden the world became very colorful.
Yes. Well, Well, basically, I ended up making my own sprayers. It was because I used spray paint prior. So very simple. It was like a $10 garden sprayer. And I took these pigments and mixed it with water. And all of a sudden, because of the fact that I had done so many large scale murals, I knew how to paint on a very large scale. And so then I combined that with the drone. And then now fundamentally what I had was this adventurous, kinetic, very mysterious process. And I say that because the first time I went out to paint and put these natural pigments, which of course I was using the most toxic prior, right? A spray can, the acetone, the aerosol. That is, you have to wear a mask to even spray it, right? So now I'm completely using natural materials. The birds are hovering above me. You hear the water. And it was such a deep, powerful experience that I became absolutely enthralled and obsessed with making art in nature. Yeah.
Making art in nature.
That's right.
And I remember the first time I asked this question, you said to me, one of the things that was inspiring to you was you bringing art into nature, which is usually what we usually hear the opposite. People usually say, we try to take the beauty, be inspired by nature, and then create art somewhere else. But you are saying that you're creating art in nature.
Well, to be honest, nature doesn't need any of my additions. It's so gorgeous and beautiful. It's more of like a dialogue. You love it so much, right? I just loved being in nature that I'm like, can I speak with you? Can we talk?
So it's kind of like homage paying in a way.
Maybe.
It's like your way of paying homage to nature.
To some degree. And there's nature. And there's certainly other mysterious elements, the themes in which that I'm interested in. So for example, like when my daughter was born, I did a piece of her. The piece was called Born of Nature, born of what I would say is born of ephemeral, born of like we are ephemeral beings. From dust we were made, to dust we return.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really interested in entering into mysteries. I'm not interested in imposing something as so much as entering into a dialogue of what it means to exist on this planet. Yeah. So it's big, it's existential. And I just like entering into that space. Yeah.
I don't know. I might sound arrogant, but I kind of completely understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying completely. And it's not like shocking to me at all. Like, I think these are feelings that normal human beings should have.
That's true.
And you might have the added ability to communicate those feelings in a way that's very provocative and attractive and inspiring. But I think this is really how humans in general feel. So, and that's probably why so many people are able to relate to your work, which brings me to my second question. When we get back, we're going to ask David about his unique approach to exploring themes of anthropology in his work. Stay tuned on Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we're back with David. So David, you have a keen interest in communicating themes that relate to anthropology. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I guess fundamentally it's anthropology and the nature of the fact that cultures and people rise and fall, and our own, as I said prior, like I'm doing pieces of, for example, my newborn daughter, knowing that even her existence, how beautiful it is to come into the world, and the miracle of experiencing a birth of a child, that we all pass away. And like, what do you do with that? And I've also done different pieces. For example, I'm working on a series I'm most known for my series on the ice. In Finland, I'm right next to the Baltic Sea. And so it freezes over in the wintertime. And right around this time, March, April, it fragments and cracks. And so I'm working on a series right now. And I begun it last year called Remnants of the Past, where I basically create these remnants. And so like Greek statues, for example, just with charcoal in my sprayers on these fracturing pieces of ice to almost symbolize that these ancient cultures are no more, in a sense. And certainly being in AlUla, and it's been a fascinating experience, because what we have going on here, and for example, the site in Hegra, which I've been at this whole week, is sort of a resurrection of what once was, and to honor that and to keep that alive in some way. And so I'm interested in all these themes, the fact that civilizations rise and fall, and also they're still with us. and the memories of people and their wisdom. But more than anything, it's just a dialogue.
Speaking of AlUla
Mm-hmm.
and your love for ancient cultures, tell me what makes AlUla such an inspirational place for artists?
Well, as you just heard, I've only been here for 2 weeks. And so initially you do some research, and of course we all have seen Petra, for example, and we've heard about the Nabatean people. And so it was a huge shock to do some research and say, well, wow, like there are 111 of these tombs. Like, and to almost feel like, why haven't I heard about this? And then to arrive, and really, this is the sort of dream place for me. It's just like oohing with all, I guess, at least all the things that I love, these stories and mysteries, and how did these people live, and these remnants of the past that are beautifully being brought back to life by characters like the Rawi storytellers, not tour guides, but storytellers. This is all the stuff that this makes me crazy and just absolutely in love. We talk about the beauty of the nature, and also that's almost similar to the way I approach my work, where you have the existing gorgeous shapes and organic tones and asymmetry in nature, which is what we have all within the sandstone rocks. And then someone comes and makes the tombs, and it's symmetrical, but it's etched from these organic shapes, and it's so beautiful, and just is beckoning you, especially these doorways where you walk, and there's, of course, I'm speaking specifically about the tombs. It's almost, and some of them being so high that, right, there's no stairs leading to them. We actually, just yesterday, we went to some of the tombs, and we were able to fly some drones a bit, and it kicked up some dust, and I entered this tomb, and it was just filled with this dust, and it was just, I get chills just talking about it. It is so mysterious to enter into some of these places and to imagine, and it's just a land full of fables and beauty. And I'm going to be very honest with you, there's certainly certain prejudices that I had coming from the West, right? You're going to Saudi Arabia, and I had friends and people going to Saudi Arabia. And then I arrive, and there's just so much hospitable people and just beautiful people, the amount of people I met. It was just, I'm still processing it. Yeah, I think a lot of people back home are going to be very surprised by my experience and how badly I want to come back.
Well, I'm not surprised that you had a great experience, to be quite frank, but I'm happy that you were so comfortable here, and that you were shown, which was expected, of course, of Saudis and even the expats living in this community, is hospitality. And I'm so happy that you were able to enjoy that here in AlUla. But tell me, you came to AlUla. You say essentially it's like a place that should be the setting of like Prince of Persia or Assassin's Creed or like Tomb Raider.
That's right.
And you're telling me that 200,000 years of human history, and you're telling me the story hasn't been told enough. And then you told me how attractive storytelling is. In fact, you were impressed by the Rawis. Instead of being called tour guides, they're called Rawis because they are storytellers. Up next, we dive into David's perspective on the role of storytelling in human evolution and how artists bridge historical gaps through their creations. Keep listening to Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
Back on Artifact, we continue our conversation with the renowned artist, David Popa. So David, a lot of scientists and anthropologists, they tell us that we're able to evolve only because of our interest in hearing stories. So everything in the world, essentially, was developed so that someone else would tell its story. And so when you're working in AlUla and 200,000 years of human history, you see the tombs, you see the nature, you see the art, you now, as an artist, are filling the gaps by creating a story. And so essentially, you are working with the raw material, which is AlUla. But you specifically, you have an approach to raw material, which is your pride in using raw materials, much like our ancestors would have thousands and thousands of years ago. Why?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the why initial was was very shallow, to be honest, right? I wanted to do work in nature. So how can I do something that was natural and not harm the nature? And then I was just entered, as I said, into a very mysterious space. And I couldn't believe that using these raw materials, calcium carbonate chalk, earth pigments fundamentally being earth that is rich in iron and that interacts with oxygen. It's called iron oxide. And so that's what you find.
What color is that for those of us who don't know?
They're normally very warm tones. So we have yellows and reds, and even at the site here, we've got some purples. And right at the base of the tomb that I was able to have the privilege on working on, you've got the yellow iron oxide. So we're fundamentally using the same materials that we're walking on, and there's plenty of calcium carbonate mixed up in clay and so on and so forth. And so to answer your question, I guess I pride myself now, but I almost feel like I don't take. You're on an adventure, right? And you're trying to discover what is it that's going to fill in these gaps. And I have this urge, from the deepest parts of myself, I want to create nature and enter the space, and I have to do that in an honorable way. And you're presented with these materials.
And it must have been so daunting and intimidating. Not because of your level of skill or your level of knowledge, but come on, this place has been settled for 200,000 years and not much is known. It's not like I have that much to work off of.
Oh, that's interesting. Because the piece itself it's the largest piece I've ever done by far. I guess in meters, anywhere from 150 meters. What I've created are these two hands that are holding this sort of iconic tomb. And so we're talking about about 150 meters of each hand. And so these are, massive and can be seen from the helicopter and the hot air balloon. So we're dealing with large amounts of pigments and I use hand sprayers and these larger air sprayers. Yeah, to create the work. Yeah.
But why is it the raw materials? Why is it the natural materials?
Well, fundamentally,
is that essential to the way David approaches art, or is that something that you did specifically for AlUla, or is that because you're environmentally conscious? What is it?
It's a bit of all of the above, but I don't believe you could. Well, okay. First and foremost, to be able to do an earthwork, you shouldn't be using any unnatural materials. That's number one. Number two, I had experimented with basically having glues or binders, but ended up on one of my first largest pieces, ended up just using water, and then realizing that if you just use water, the piece is fundamentally ephemeral. It will wash away.
Yes.
And so in the first major rainstorm that occurs here in AlUla, the piece, for the most part, maybe more for the most part, fundamentally will be gone. And that theme, the ephemeral, became a major theme in my work. As I mentioned prior, this sort of mystery of life is what at least, and it's also what makes it so exciting to make the work, especially in different contexts. Here, I had the luxury of not having a lot of rain or any signs of rain. Yes. Although this is the season. Am I wrong?
Well, our entire winter season is technically a potential raining season.
Right? Yeah. That's right. So it ended up being a perfect match when we talk about these beautiful locations that, if we don't care for them, are also in risk of fading away and not being cared for. So that's...
But your ethos, when you're creating these artwork,
yeah,
are you creating it? Because a lot of people talk about we want something that's going to last for generations.
That's right, yeah.
And then a lot of people are saying, okay, we want something to last for generations, but we want it to be eco-friendly and we want it to be sustainable. We want it to check so many boxes and it needs to be within budget. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it needs to speak to a wide audience and it needs to do this and needs to do that. Is it a part of your ethos that you're creating works as if you were creating a sandcastle at the beach that is not supposed to last so long? Or are you looking for this to last for many decades or centuries to come?
No, not at all.
Impermanence
is
a part of your ethos.
A fundamental part of my ethos.
But so we have some things that we don't want to be impermanent in AlUla.
That's right.
Which is the historical sites, the ancient artworks, some of the artifacts. And part of your job for when you were coming to AlUla was communicating the eye care campaign.
That's right.
And of course, we're going to get into your specific participation with eye care. But when we're trying to preserve things that have been around for thousands of years. And then you're telling me, well, I'm here to communicate the importance of impermanence.
Right. Yeah.
Is there a cross section there that we're not seeing so clearly that only somebody like you could see?
Well, basically symbolically, because what will happen, as I mentioned, is that it will fade away. And so you see a large work of art that you clearly see like, well, this artist put a lot of hard work into, and then we'll share a bit of a time lapse of it fading away. And so you ask the question like, well, you spent so long like making this thing or like working, why? And a lot of people ask me that, but that's such a shame. You worked so hard and it's gone now. And we're trying to pull that exact connection to, well, look at the incredible beauty and heritage of AlUla, and to just to be part of, well, yeah, fundamentally the eye care campaign is more than just a campaign. It's getting people to say, look, if we don't act and care, it will pass away right in front of you. And we don't want that to happen.
So you were paying through your artwork before, you're paying homage to nature. And now you're paying homage to another type of chur, which is culture.
That's exactly right. And I would say this is my first work that's doing that. And along with that ethos, I'm a firm believer that we need to preserve our culture. And that's a whole nother conversation.
We're going to need 2 episodes.
That's right.
2 episodes for that. Coming up, we delve into David's emotional journey as an artist, exploring the depths of his feelings and experiences while creating art, right here on Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we're back with David. David, please tell us about your feelings and your emotions. I mean, you are an artist, right? And essentially you are communicating feelings and emotions. And what are some of the emotions that are involved within yourself when making art here in AlUla?
It's a really interesting question because each location I'm presented with some unique emotions. And this time around, actually being one of the first real desert sort of landscapes that I've ever created in, evokes some really unique emotions that I feel like I'm still wrestling and grappling with. I think a lot of it is also tied to the fact that we're meeting some local people, we're hearing local music. It's a holistic experience when you come into such a new country and you're seeing these gorgeous sunsets. And so there's a nature, there's a culture, there's people, and all of that is building into this emotional resonance where, it was a couple times, certainly at the end and right at the beginning, I saw so many photos of the site, and then to actually be present, it's a very emotional experience. I was pretty much on the brink of tears.
So it was like solemn, it was sad.
No. It's like humility because it's such a enormous privilege. And we're talking about a World Heritage Site. And so I'm very well aware of the enormous privilege it is to be part of the eye care campaign. And you sort of have to really do honor to, there's a bit of weight on your shoulders where you want to do honor to, you just want to do the absolute best you can with all my abilities, all my training, all of my love for art, and just pour it all out. And to be very honest with you, this is my largest work to date. We were sort of almost inventing new ways because it was so large. There was my prior techniques didn't really fill in the gaps. And so, we were never 100% sure we could even pull it off. Every day we were running into different hurdles, and it was like, are we going to be able to pull this off in the time allotted? And it was just miraculous when it all came in the end, because there's so many other people. I'm the artist, but I have one of my best friends from high school who's here with me, providing all different kind of support, emotional support. And my manager is here, and she ended up literally, in order to process the earth black, there were some thicker chunks. So she had her hands basically like filtering this black pigment for like hours on end in these water buckets. And we had another Saudi, one of my good friends, he's now my good friend, Abud. I mean, this guy was working. This guy slept like a couple hours each night. And so it's such a team effort in the end. And so when you talk about like the emotions I feel, it's so tied to the people I ended up meeting and the team effort and everything combined. And we all got pretty emotional on the final day and just hugging each other because we didn't really know if there's only a certain amount of time we have permit for the place and the drone permit, this, the other. There's so much that goes into something like this. And so it was just one of the most amazing experiences of my life, I'm going to be honest with you.
And what made that happen for you was this eye care campaign that you're participating in.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Up next, we explore how David's participation in the eye care campaign has influenced his artistic journey. Don't go anywhere.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
So David, tell me about eye care, the campaign. What is that about?
Well, I'm just a small part of, a much bigger movement, which is really caring for heritage, caring for the beauty of AlUla, of these incredible cultural treasures. And so it is more of a local directed campaign. And like I said, I'm just a small part of that. And hopefully through the work, in some small way.
What is the campaign trying to achieve, David?
Well, fundamentally, it's for the preservation of heritage and not to, there's been issues, right? There's been with vandalism, things like that. And
so you're telling me so this campaign is about giving awareness to people. What is it about exactly?
Certainly it's about giving awareness and to really, I guess, be a spark to a larger fire flame and to say that you have a cultural treasure here.
That's worth preserving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And
like you mentioned, actually, sometimes when I'm walking around AlUla, unfortunately, and this actually, you're talking about coming to tears because of art. I was coming to tears for the sake of art and history, I guess. When I saw people spraying, they were spraying with graffiti, which is really ironic talking to you about this. But they were spraying, someone had sprayed a heart on one of these engravings that are hundreds and thousands of years old. And when you see something like that, it's so disheartening because it's an utter disrespect to this land, its heritage. What is a people if they don't have a heritage or if they can't respect their heritage?
That's a really good point.
But what does that make you feel? Like when you see, as an artist, someone's art, someone's message is being desecrated?
It's also about education. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and my dad was one of the first graffiti writers, right?
Yes.
And then things came full circle and of course in my work, it's very different. I would say I don't use paint, right? Fundamentally it's earth and water. And so, but yes, no, you're exactly right.
For you to be here in Saudi Arabia, to talk about the role that art has in preserving modern art, the role that modern art has in preserving the art of the past.
That's exactly right. I wouldn't be an artist if I didn't believe that art could act as a vehicle that enters, I would say, into the back door of your brain, right? Or into your heart, into a way that's not, for a lot of people, it's not a list of rules or codes, and it hits you emotionally. I'm hoping to communicate something on a deeper level where we say, aha, like, I get it. Like if we're not able to come and rally and preserve our heritage, are we suited to leave the future generation better than what we've had in the past? Yeah.
David, for our last question, as an artist, tell me what kind of inspiration you got from the inscriptions that you saw in AlUla. The ostriches, people hunting, the camels, the leopards that you saw, usually in white, etched in the rocks all around AlUla.
Yeah, it's, as I mentioned to you earlier, it's literally, these are some of the most inspirational, iconic, the imagery of cave paintings and running on, it's to me.
Because we were talking about earlier how you were into cave painting.
That's right, yeah.
And so just to come back full circle, when we get back, we'll ask David about the inspiration, emotions, and intrigue evoked by ancient inscriptions and engravings. Stay connected with Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
We're back on Artifact with David. David, tell me, what kind of inspiration, emotions, what kind of interest do you feel when you saw those inscriptions?
Yeah, it's
or engravings.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I mean, just on the way to the bathroom at the site, there was, these camels, and it's almost very hard to put into words. It is just like being transported into another realm, and to think that other artists had done this just thousands of years ago. I mean, it's just, oh man, it's really just quite hard to put into words. You're entering into like a mysterious realm of, there's a lot of people that just theorize, like, why is it that we make art? Why is it that are these inscriptions just like, oh, these are how many camels I have, or this is this is how we hunt. I believe is to say that, will we exist? And it's asking the biggest questions. And I think that's why we make art, why we dance, why we sing. It's a wrestling, it's a dialogue with what it is to be human and exist.
I think they're so charming.
Oh, and they're also whimsical and fun. Yeah.
Yes, I think they're very whimsical.
Yes, definitely.
I think that's definitely the word. And you feel like they're taunting the person who is looking at them.
That's interesting you say that.
Because you saw the ostriches, you saw the leopards. Like, no child is going up there with his hammer and chisel. Do you know what I'm saying? On those mountains. Maybe, but for me, it would be like, I'm a modern American talking to you on a podcast. And so just imagine, I don't ever imagine it's children who are making those inscriptions. So I'm thinking about grown men drawing very round leopards. Do you know what I'm saying? Very like satirical, almost like it's as if, to me, of course, this is not what it is, but this is from my perception. Yeah. It is as if that was like their version of a comic book. You know what I'm saying?
And to go to such great lengths to do them too, right?
Yes.
This is the mystery behind some of these geoglyphs, right? Which are found all over the world. These massive works done on the land that can really only be seen properly from above, which is like, I say, I'm entering into that, a bit of that history, which is just like, why go to such great lengths or why go to such great lengths for the tombs, for the beauty? Like what? And we can theorize, but there's something about art. You know, without art, life is blah.
And I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. Without art, life is
blah.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. All right. And that was Mr. David Popa, who worked on an amazing piece. We will show you guys on our social media channels. I'm your host, Joshua Van Alstyne, and we'll see you guys very soon on our next episode of Artifact.
Thanks for listening to Artifact.
Thanks.
Subscribe for more great content right here on AlUla FM Podcast, the sound of Arabia.